Never forget, Christopher Columbus discovered the piece of land that you now call home. I found a video on YouTube from, I think, ABC News that had a title that annoyed me. It says, U.S. recognizes Indigenous Peoples Day. And the reason the title annoyed me is because it said U.S. recognizes. I'm part of the U.S., and I don't recognize that because it's Columbus Day. Just the same as I don't recognize that an apple is a banana, I don't recognize that a holiday that I already know about is magically now a different holiday just because somebody said so.
Many people across the country are observing Indigenous Peoples Day today, which celebrates Indigenous people and honors their communities and their culture. This year marks the first time a U.S. president has formally recognized the day. President Biden issued a proclamation on Friday observing today, October 11th, as a day to honor Native Americans and their contributions to American history.
I didn't think this current administration could get any stupider. But today has proven that the stupidity is strong with this one. So today, the idiot tyrant running our country has decided to rename Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day.
Joining me now is Matthew Fletcher, professor of law and the director of the Indigenous Law and Policy Center at Michigan State University. Professor, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
Great. Right off the bat, how significant is it that a U.S. president has formally recognized Indigenous Peoples Day?
Well, it's pretty significant. I mean, we've come full circle from 1792 when the very first proclamation was issued on Columbus Day. Christopher Columbus wasn't even a real person. The name of the person was Cristobal Colon from Italy.
So he's saying just because Christopher Columbus's name was different in Italy, where he's from, that means that he wasn't real when he came over here to this piece of land that we now call America. That would be like saying if I go to France and my name is Veronique because that's how you say Veronica in French, that means I'm not a real person anymore. So because my name is different, that means I'm not a real person. So anyone who's ever changed their name, just remember, this law professor thinks you're not a real person.
And so for a president to come around and say that the contributions of Indigenous peoples, of Native Americans to the United States are equal to, if not superior to that of the discoverer, so to speak, is really quite remarkable.
So I'm not sure what he's saying. He's saying that because Indigenous peoples were already on the piece of land when Christopher Columbus discovered it, that means that just existing in a place makes you more important than someone who discovered something new. So I guess they're saying that stagnation is the new exploration.
And yet I feel like it's in the lexicon of so many people these days. Both of my kids use it as if it's always been, but it's not. The day is not yet a federal holiday, but there is a bill in Congress proposing to make it one. What would that recognition mean to Indigenous peoples all across the country?
So I love how the dumbass idiot tyrant in chief that we have in the White House, although some people claim or suspect that he's not really in the White House because it seems like there's green screen staged sets that he's on. So people are claiming that the dumbass tyrant idiot chief in charge is doing remarkable things, but the only things that he's done that I've seen that are, well, actually I've not seen anything that's been remarkable. The remarkably terrible things that he's done are really large. I can't think of... He seems to be a big fan of signing new federal holidays, though, like Juneteenth to replace Independence Day, Indigenous Peoples Day to replace Columbus Day. Like, he seems to be really good at that, which doesn't say much because doing those things is not good.
Well, it would set a tone for how our children are taught in schools. There is a history to the United States that is incredibly complex, and it's a benefit to all Americans to have a greater sense of what the complexities are. That there were good and bad things that came out of relationships between the United States, America, and non-Indian American citizens and the indigenous peoples. There's an enormous amount of cultural and political give and take that has benefited the United States more generally between Indian people and non-Indian people. And so I think that that acknowledgement would really help to cement that sort of understanding.
I have no idea what he's jibber jabbering on about because I feel like Indigenous Peoples Day that they want and Columbus Day are about two completely different things. Columbus Day is about Christopher Columbus literally coming to the other side of the world from where he was from and discovering land. And the Indigenous Peoples Day, if they want to have that, that's fine. But it seems like he's more talking about like the cultural relations between Indigenous people and other Americans in present day. And he talks about history, but there's a disconnect because when Christopher Columbus came here, America wasn't America yet. It was just the new world, like a piece of land that was brand new. So these days don't even like correlate in my mind. Like they're not even the same thing. And you can't like I don't know. It's like the conception of America when Columbus discovered the land that would later become America, and then indigenous peoples wanting to have relations with the other Americans in today's society so that we can understand them better. That has nothing to do with history. That just is like public relations or something.
There are a lot of ways, but if you can pinpoint a few, how have contributions by Indigenous people been overlooked throughout our nation's history?
Well, let's just start with food. About 2/3 of all the kinds of staples of food in the world comes from the Western Hemisphere. Things like chocolate and squash, so tomatoes, all of that comes from the United States, from the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Politically, Native people have been, in the past 50 years or so, been really creative, true laboratories of democracy in terms of developing new ideas on child welfare, pollution control, conservation, the kind of interactions between governments, national governments, and state, local, and tribal governments have all been tribes have really been on the cutting edge. And very few people know that tribes are really engaging in this activity.
And representation within the U.S. government, White House Interior Secretary Deb Haaland is the first Native American to hold that position. What does that kind of representation mean to Indigenous people?
Well, very specifically, it means that there is finally a high-level inclusion of Native peoples in the national government, the American government. The Department of the Interior, one could argue, was founded to deal with the, quote, Indian problem. But the problem there is that the solution involves Indian people and Native American people. And so these interactions, these major decisions that involve, that implicate all Americans, that are important to all Americans, are finally being addressed from a perspective of a Native and Indigenous woman, which is really quite remarkable.
Finally, Professor, how will Indigenous people across the country be celebrating this holiday? And actually tell us how some cities have celebrated it in the past.
Well, you're starting to see more and more cities, and I think as many as 12 states have issued proclamations or even identified the date as a state or local holiday. You will see marches that involve certainly protests, but there will also be in celebrations of culture and language. Native people have fought very hard to maintain their traditions in light of a lot of ignorance about Indian people and a lot of, frankly, assimilation and oppression. And they should celebrate. We should all celebrate the differences between us, the plurality within our cultures. And you're starting to see more and more of that across the country. And it's really quite amazing.
Professor Matthew Fletcher, thanks so much for taking the time on this Indigenous Peoples Day.
So, I guess I don't really understand what the purpose of this day is in relation to Columbus Day, other than they want to erase American history, which annoys me that the person who's supposed to be in charge of our country is willingly trying to erase our country's history. And as a person who lives in this country, I am offended by our administration for being such a tard. I'm annoyed when people are ungrateful about history, when they try to pull the race card and crap like that. I am glad in this video they didn't seem to pull the race card, which is good. They were just talking about the holiday. That's fine. But I still think that it doesn't have anything to do with Columbus, other than they're trying to take Columbus Day and replace it with this. And I wouldn't mind them having an Indigenous Peoples Day, but I don't think that you should take away Columbus Day, because again, as I said, do you like the ground that you stand on or sit on, or that your house is on? Because if you do, it wouldn't be here if Christopher Columbus hadn't discovered it. So I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm grateful that he was brave enough to come over and discover new territory, no matter what hardships he may have faced. I'm glad that he did that, and I hope you are too. So happy Columbus Day, and I'll see you on the next video.